You were saying about the event?
I was saying, yes, I was saying, yeah. So there's an event going on in Manhattan tomorrow with it's not a design system thing. It just happens to be full of design system people in the audience, which is just ironic. So a couple weeks ago, Zero Height had a panel that included a couple of design system practitioners that were just talking about
Yeah.
design system things. And one of the people on that panel was a person named Aaron, and Aaron is an improv comedian that does shows in Manhattan. And in the chat, I was like, where's the link to the shows? So I subscribed to it, and the next show is tomorrow. So I was like, I looked at my wife. I was like, "Oh, let's go to the show." So okay, cool. And then I reached out to the another panelist that was with her on that event that I knew that I met at Smashing last year, and I was like, "Hey, you're going to go to Erin's thing?" She's like, "Oh, well, if you're going, I'll go." And then she's bringing along another like mutual friend that's also in like this space. So now the event, like the list that's in the Luma right now, is 4 people, and it's all design system people just
So
because it's all people that we all know at the moment. I'm hoping that there's other people that show up too, just to fill in the crowd. But other than that, there's going to be a whole bunch of like I'm assuming design system jokes because of because of the people that'll be in
dude,
the crowd.
you found all four design system improv actors in the entire state.
No, no, no. So it's just the audience members that are going
Oh,
to the show. One of the people that's in a comedian in the show does like content design and was in that on that panel for Zero Height. So we just the group of that I know, which knew of that panel,
yeah,
said, "Let's go. Let's see what's cooking." But yeah, whatever event that you're running in Manhattan
yeah.
in the next couple of weeks, I'll be there.
That's
As long as it's
amazing.
not conflicting with some other BS,
Can
because
you
I want to be where the people are.
can you invite your content designer friend who does improv? Because our co-organizer Michelle Chu is also in improv and she's a designer. So I'm like, oh, that's awesome because there aren't that many of them.
Hell yeah! Oh
Yeah,
yeah! No, in fact, there's an entire community of, I guess, content designers
yeah.
that people kind of don't really know about, and it's a group called Write the Docs, and they've had meetings here actually in Manhattan. That it's all content designers, all people who write documentation, technical documentation, voice and tone, all that kind of stuff. They usually actually the meetings that have been here in New York have been in the MongoDB offices for the past couple of times. So
Yeah.
if there are people that are into content design, highly recommend checking that community out. There's a big Slack channel, which is very active, which has let's see if I can tell you how many people are in that Slack right now. Uh, I need to add the workspace. My new computer, such is life.
Oh yeah.
Sign into another workspace. Oh, actually, you know what? I could probably find out here on my
No
phone.
worries. I'll just do my opening
Um,
spiel because we're live now. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Do it.
I'll do it myself while you do this. So
Hey,
yeah, so thank you everyone for coming back. This will be our third episode of the day. We're raising money for Tiffany, who lost her house, her home in Altadena in the wildfires not too long ago. So our GoFundMe, we're about 60% filled, and we just raised about $700 today. So that's amazing. And we raised about $1,000 yesterday. So let's see if we can hit $1,000 again today. So that'd be amazing. Thank you everyone who's donated. We really, really appreciate you. Any amount of money you can spare helps a lot. The suggested donation rate is $25 for each of these episodes. But if you have any more money you can donate, we gladly appreciate that. And if it's less than that, totally fine as well. Every dollar helps. So thank you so much, everyone. So a little bit about Donnie D'Amato. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
that's
Yeah,
right.
cool.
That sounds
Yeah,
good to me.
so we met at a design engineering meetup not too long ago, and I was like, damn, I love your energy, dude. Like, you seem like a lot of fun, and you're always about going to these events, and you're like super into design systems. So I gotta have you on the show, just like
Mhm.
talk about design systems, because this is like one of the hottest jobs right now. Even though the market's kind of down, I feel like for growth design and design systems, there's still like a lot of hiring happening right now. So, would you mind giving us a brief introduction about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I've been working in the design system space for a few years now. I'll say something like eight, 8 years. Kind of like I guess um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like I guess specifically or whatever. I'm saying because I probably did a whole bunch of design system stuff before I realized it was called design systems. But I guess I've titled myself design system architect for the past like 8 years. So it's kind of like the person that oversees the platform of what design's meant to look like for any particular organization and how you might execute that vision to keep things consistent. Because the bottom line, when it comes to us making products, especially digital products, that people are going from page to page to page, is that a user must trust that they are on the place or the page that they are expecting to be on. And as soon as trust is lost, then you lose that user, right? And that user
Hmm.
comes along with a credit card, right? So you want to make sure that that user trusts that they are on that page, and the way that they are trusting that they are on the right page is that they have seen the expressions and treatments as consistent designs across every single page, right? Because as soon as you think that you have something cute that you want to do on your specific app or this specific page, you will introduce friction, even if a little bit, to the experience such that a user could second guess and say, am I actually putting my credit card in the right place now? Is this really the same site that I'm supposed to be? Like, what's happening here, right? If it's not a consistent experience, that's when the user starts questioning, and you might lose users from that. So, what a design system does as a selling point is it maintains the trust for your users as they go through those things. And I got into it just because of the whole idea of not being comfortable with my little app that I would work on for any particular large company, and realized that, like, why does my app look different from somebody else's at the same company? Like, it shouldn't, right? We should be using the
Hmm.
same resources, the same look, the same feel, the same stuff, so that we all know that this is under, Acme Co. Like, this is the Acme Co look and feel and experience, and this is how we portray ourselves, and you know what to expect, as opposed to just continuously, you know, rebranding constantly, and users have no idea what to do with themselves, especially since, like, apps will go through phases of rebrand. Like, this app is not prepared for a rebrand, but this one is moving really fast. This one has a new designer who wants to make waves. This one has an old designer that knows better. So, like, that's where the design system really shines. Is it, like, it puts everybody into, hopefully, an agreement that everyone then can see the value in. Hopefully, cross the fingers.
So it sounds like design systems kind of came about with the need for more consistency across apps and across pages. Do you feel like it's grown far beyond that at this point? Are we still stuck
Um,
in the consistency era?
so the bottom line when it comes to design systems is really about agreement, like trying to get everybody to agree. So if
Yeah.
your org is already agreeing on something, like some approach, and it's documented in a way that could be repeatable, meaning that, like, a new person comes in and they could see something and say, I see the agreement, I can go along with that, right? That's all really a design system is. We have been convoluting it a lot with lots of different things like tokens and components and style guides and other resources to make this into a role, which I'm happy that exists right now. Um, but the fact of the matter is that people lose sight of what the need of the design system is, in favor of the excitement of the new role and the excitement of playing. This is honestly the place where you play with color. You technically should be playing with color at the system level, not at the app level, right? Because the decision in terms of what color something should be in your interface doesn't exist at the app level, right? If you're looking at, like, I don't know, the product page on your app, what color the button is shouldn't be a decision that's made at the product page. It should be at the system level that says, well, all buttons are this color. So therefore, at the system level, we decide what color it is. Now, it doesn't mean necessarily that the people that maintain the system make that decision. That should be like a, like a democracy that says, well, the org says that the color is this, and we just distribute that color. But in terms of, like, I guess what it's, if it's more than, I think is the question more about like what it's turning into, like what design systems is turning into? Is that kind of what you're asking about?
Yeah, because it feels like it's turning into more than just making sure things are consistent. Like because that's kind of table stakes in some ways. You're
You
making
like to
sure
think
that
so?
yeah, I think so, but perhaps maybe you're right. We have a hard time just keeping consistency without a design system in place.
100%. And even with one, right? Because the whole thing about that agreement part, which is the thing that makes it hard, is, have you been in a room of designers that all fucking agree? No, right? Like, or if you have, that's pretty unique, because then, there was a good hiring process, there was a good culture. But it is of my experience that putting a dozen designers in a room and saying, what color should this button be, especially ones with strong opinions, you're going to have a really hard time just agreeing on that one thing, let alone an entire experience. You know, so that's the thing that makes this all very hard. Is there's designers that have a big opinions, designers that want to make a big splash, designers that know better, that are more senior, because the senior designers, they know better. They know that
Sure.
spinning your wheels about button color doesn't matter. Um, Spinning your wheels about how a user reacts to an interface is more important than the button color, especially since the button color in a good system can be changed very quickly. It's the user experience that's important, right? Lipstick on a pig is not doing anything. Um, but there are some interesting things about the future design systems that I think, or just the future of user interface design, that came to light for me about a year ago. Um, and that was when the Rabbit was announced at CES. So you familiar with the Rabbit?
You're talking about the bright orange AI device that was like
Bingo.
pretty
Yeah.
terrible, but it was cool when it was first
Yeah.
announced. You're like, this is awesome.
Yeah. Absolutely. I have one on my desk, because of course I do. I'm a tech nerd. I love buying
Yeah.
stupid tech, and I knew immediately when I saw it that I wasn't going to use it. I knew it, but it was $200. I'm like, whatever. It's orange. It's cute. It's a sign of the times. It's like a time capsule kind of thing. I'm like, whatever. But there's something a little bit more, I guess, important about that kind of stake in the ground for that thing, which was that what that claimed to do was it claimed to have something called the LAM, right? The large action model. And what that
Okay.
thing was really under the hood was really just a puppeteer just hitting buttons and stuff. But um, the the idea is really interesting, right? What they were claiming to be able to do is, like, to go ahead, pick up the device. I have my Galaxy Fold here. I'm going to represent it so I don't have to get off my chair. So you have the device here, and you would basically speak into it and say, okay, um, get me an Uber to go from my house to JFK, right? And instead of you learning the Uber interface and all the stupid decisions that may have made to try to guide the user in a direction or try to upsell the user in this direction, or whatever, all that stuff could potentially be out the window, and you would just get the most affordable, safest car to get you to the airport, right?
Hmm.
No playing around with the interface, no navigating through pages, no screwing around with your credit card because it's already in the thing over here. It's literally just get me the car, and you get the car. Now, if you think about that, that means that the Uber interface in this world is useless, right? I didn't see the Uber interface when I experienced this interaction, right? All I said to my device was, "Get me the car," and then it says, "Okay, we got you the car. Would you like to take the car?" You hit confirm as a button that just is the Rabbit interface, or it could be a physical button. Who cares? Um, And now there's no longer an Uber interface for me, right? Because I'm just interacting voice and it's figuring out what that interface looks like. And the thing that's like zapped through my brain for me was, well, hold on a second. If the majority of the world was interfacing this way, then what happens to my job, right? Because then we're not doing UI design any longer. There is no visual UI any longer. Now, granted, like there is not everything can be done this way, right? Not everything can be done in a way like Figma, for example. You're gonna need a UI for Figma, right? But for a thing like Uber, like, do you need a UI for it? And if you think back a couple, maybe a couple of decades ago, before Uber, I used to phone for a taxi. It's the exact same thing, right? I talked to
Right.
a human being, and the interface was the phone, and that person would then dispatch someone to my house to get me to JFK, right? So that experience existed already. We just put a whole bunch of technology in front of it. So now what the rabbit was claiming to do is say, well, we're going to go back to what that was because the interfaces are all over the place, right? And a
Right.
lot of bias in that interface. And what we're going to do is cut the fat and say, we're going to get this thing done as quickly as possible. And I think there's something really interesting about that and something that we should be paying attention to from a design perspective about what happens when graphical user interfaces kind of get sunset a little bit in some cases, right? As the
You
technology gets better.
you become a conversational designer.
I mean, are any designers really ready for that? Because I really think that's an entire paradigm shift of what that looks like, Like, that's
Conversational
not talking about what
designers,
color the button is anymore.
they're ready.
Well, they will claim that they're ready, right? But
Yeah.
realistically, yeah.
So, by your estimate, then all the efficiency-based tools out there, like say accounting software and taxis and just like finding out information, mapping, maybe even like brokerage software can all be based on voice and the interface changes dramatically. But I guess entertainment, things like TikTok and Instagram, it's still going to have a typical user interface. So that's really cool though. So, but your current job, so you're a principal designer on the design system side right now, right?
So more accurately, I'm a principal engineer on the design system at GoDaddy. I have some influence on design over there, but not enough for me to make significant waves personally. But I do speak about design publicly. I mean, I teach at Parsons School of Design for the past like 5 years now in the research and interaction design courses. So, and prior to that, I've had other roles that are design focused. But yeah, my day job is at GoDaddy, talking about the engineering for their design system, more
So
specifically.
if you believe in this vision that you just described, actually, first of all, do you believe in
Mhm.
it? Do you like wholeheartedly
Um,
believe this is going to happen? And if so, how long it's going to take?
I want it to happen, is what I'll say. I want a I and I say I want this because I am here's my hot take is that I am less and less confident in the UX designers that are being hired today than have been hired in previous years. And I say that because of sites like awards and CSS design awards and other places that are looking for shiny shit that is completely unusable unless you're a handful of other designers that are on the forefront of technology, right? Like, if I was to ask, the person who bags my groceries at the supermarket to use any one of those awards sites to achieve a goal, I'm very confident that they would be having a very difficult time doing that. But the problem is that designer has an emotional reaction to those sites to go, wow, that's pretty, and they forget that what we're trying to do in many of the cases of self-building products is it needs to be usable first, right? It's the whole adage of form following function, right? Function has to happen first before we add that form to ensure that the thing is usable, because if it's not usable, you're losing money, plain and simple. right? If the person can't put their credit card in or don't even know what the heck they're buying, right? You're not going to get a credit card and therefore gone, right? It's just pretty. That's all it is. So I want to focus more on the function, right? When you have
Okay.
something like this, where there is no form other than the orange, right, and the physical button potentially, and the voice interaction, there's no GUI, right? There's nothing for them to have opinions about in that way. All the opinions, for the most part, I should say, are focused around purely about the UX, right? How does the user achieve their goal? Will there be upselling? Of course there is. That's how the hell we make it money in here, right? It's all about the advertisement. That's how YouTube got, turned to shit over years. But, at the end of the day, I would love to see a more of a focus on UX. And if that requires us to throw out the GUI in favor of focusing on UX, honestly, so be it. But um, I'm realistic in that way in terms of saying I don't think it's happening tomorrow. I don't even think it's going to be happening in the next 5 years when we're talking about this kind of stuff. Um, I'll I'll claim maybe we'll start seeing something more legitimate in 10 years from now, but that's really a matter of priority, right? There has to be a priority that refocuses us on user experience and less about the pretty thing that looks pretty and is pretty that ends up getting CEOs excited and pouring a whole bunch of money because it is pretty. Um, so
I feel
careful
like
about it.
I feel like you just had a spicy take there because
Oh
I
yeah,
feel like when I talk to a lot of other designers, they're saying, designers have gotten away from their craft. And a lot of them nowadays are just focused on research or strategy or usability, and less so on whether or not something can actually be shipped or be built because they've lost the ability to do the end part of the design work, making the interface, building it, etc. And in a way, you're kind of saying the opposite. And like I gotta ask, like, what do you think is happening in the last few years that's like changing the average designer into more of a visual focus type of designer versus focusing on usability?
probably the mundane of making a product for an organization. It's mundane. It's not meant to be exciting typically, right? It's meant to get a job done. And if you
Sure.
have the cycles to go ahead and like make it pretty afterwards, great. But a lot of the times, no, we need a new feature. Okay, get the feature out, right? And it's interesting too because something that I think may be surprising to people as well is that as a design system practitioner, most of my personal sites don't have design systems. The large majority of my sites don't have design systems. In fact, if you go to my website right now, which is donnie.diamato.design,
Yeah.
um, it's very clear that it doesn't have a design system.
Yeah.
In
I,
fact,
I visited
you
it.
could
I was like,
argue you can argue that that would be on like awards or some shit, right? Or
yeah.
some other, fun, cute little, very design heavy, very artistic site. That's what my personal site is. It's a very
Yeah.
artistic looking site. It doesn't necessarily scream design systems at all. Um, and there's a reason for that because there's a time and a place to do the craft, right? The fun experimental stuff. And there's a time and a place to not do the fun experimental stuff, right? I think the thing that's really crazy is that like I come from a generation that's like in the between of like the millennial and Gen X. They call me like Zennial or whatever. And in my generation, I began with a 9 to 5 like job where I sat at the desk and did something that I didn't really want to do. But I got the paycheck, right? Paid the bills, put food on the table, roof over my head. That's what I needed to do, right? The job was not something that I really wanted to do. All the stuff that I want to do, I do after work, right? And
Sure.
now we're in I guess, the second half of my career where I'm in a spot that I have the potential to be doing something that I love, but it's missing the part where like I would love to be doing fun stuff like my website because it's fun, but the business and actually applying it to users doesn't account for that, right? My audience over at GoDaddy, as an example, is not the same audience that's going to my website. The people going to my website, they're designers, right? They're designers
Right.
that want to look at design. They want to look pretty stuff. They want to, look at the portfolio and be like, oh, wow, this guy's a good designer, or he has good ideas, or whatever. It looks pretty, etc. Right? It's fun to talk about. But the execution that I need to do at a platform in an organization, wildly different, right? Because I need to, get a user to a goal, and those users, talking about the goals here, the users on my site, the goal is you need to contact me and find out more about the services that I offer, or my opinions or whatever, right? Over at GoDaddy, the purpose there is for people to buy a domain. So how the hell do we get a person to buy the domain, right? And who are the people that are buying those domains? Those are not designers typically. They are mom and pop shop people. They are grandparents. My grandmother had a GoDaddy account, and she bought crazy amounts of domains. My mother, who's now 70 years old, also has crazy amounts of domains. She's been buying domains there, right? Now, those are two different audiences. You got to design for the
Yeah.
audience, right?
So why do you think that the newer designers nowadays are just so focused on making things look really amazing or have a pop as opposed to making sure the usability, because making sure the usability works, right? Because the kind of work we do nowadays is very much about usability in a way. Like you have to make sure that people can use the website, or they have to convert at the end of it. Ultimately, that's what the business wants and needs. They care less so about making sure that this looks artistic or original or creative.
Same with the users. Yeah. So I think what I would attribute these greener designers coming in and saying, "Oh, I want to, uh, do the visual stuff," is they want the sexier thing. The sexier thing is the UI, right? You look at awards and you go, "Wow, this is beautiful. That's what I want to do," right? I have had people in my classes that would look at those sites and go, "Oh, that's what I want to do." And luckily, the first course that they would take in the curriculum is the 101, which is user research. There is no UI in that course. We only talk about research in that course. So I've had a lot of people end up dropping out of the curriculum because they were expecting to talk about the UI piece immediately, and you really need that foundation first. And of course, at that point, they go on their own directions, of course. But I think that's really what's coming out of this, is that there are people who are UI focused, which is fine. There's a need for UI. Don't get me wrong, but it's being convoluted with the UX part. That's why whenever I see that UX UI role, I'm like, it's probably just UI. It's usually what that is, right? That's really what they're looking for. Because if you're looking for a UX designer, doesn't necessarily mean there's any UI related in that. That's going to be talking more about flows and IA and wireframing, and okay, there's a little bit of UI in there, sure. I mean, there's you can imagine like a T-shape designer in that case, if they're going to be doing a whole spread versus being very specific. But that's why I'm always a little cautious about these hybrid like UX UI stuff, or even like it's the same thing as like full stack. Where are you on the full stack spectrum? Are you more back end, or are you more front end? Are you neither? Are you actually a database person? We have no idea. It's just so generic. So I think it's really just a matter of being sexy, right? Like the UI part is sexy. The UX part, it's not sexy. It's a research thing. That's a very specific kind of almost hidden talent that you have to get and dive into the research of something, and be unbiased about it too. That's even harder, right? To not have bias in your research that comes into an experience. To say that, well, I've been a user of GoDaddy for 15 years. I have opinions about how the experience should be. And certainly a user researcher representing GoDaddy should listen to what I'm talking about, but they shouldn't say that I'm gospel because I work here and I've been a customer for 15 years. You have to listen to all your customers, right? But I guess getting back to the original question, right, is like, I think it's really just the sexy part of UI design, right? All the pretty colors and border radiuses, purple gradients, all that stuff is fun to look at, but we're missing usability.
That's just so interesting that we have such different perspectives around what designers are over focused on right now. I feel like my perspective is the exact opposite of yours for some reason.
I don't think it's exact opposite. I think what we're saying is that there are lots of UI designers, right, that are out there that are having a good time, like, you know, designing things.
Yeah,
And I think there's a lot less of people who are focusing on the UX. Is that, are we in agreement there?
I disagree
Oh, you do disagree
because,
on that.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I disagree because I feel like there are so many designers right now, especially who are struggling to find work because they don't do enough UI design or their portfolio does not look good enough. There isn't that elevated craft that hiring managers and founders are looking for. And that's why they struggle. Like they can be exceptional in user research and also design strategy, but because they aren't able to create the final user interface, they have a hard time finding work right now. And
I see.
like they won't end up at a FANG company, that's for sure, because they'll be hiring product designers. And in most cases, they'll be looking for jobs at companies like maybe IBM or JPMC. And like I was looking through a bunch of job descriptions not too long ago. Like I looked through all 50 of them and I would like highlight all the keywords or requirements that have to do with visual design. So they'll say pixel perfect output or
Mhm.
phenomenal or beautiful. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, that requires visual design, right? So out of
Right.
50 job descriptions that I looked through, only two out of them did not require somebody to understand visual design at a high level. And checked it. I was like, okay, like one of those IBM, by the way. And I was like, okay, let me hit up the people I know at IBM. Do you need to know visual design? Like, can you kind of get away with making wireframes and low fidelity designs? And like, yeah, you can do that here. And that's about it. And I would say IBM is maybe more, I don't want to say stagnant, but their their design philosophy might be different.
More
And
traditional, maybe. Yeah.
yeah, more traditional for sure.
So it's interesting because I think we're actually talking about audiences again. The audience that I'm talking about are actually designers that have already been hired. That's the thing that I'm actually talking, like, I have
Huh.
more context now. Okay. What you're talking about is people that haven't been hired yet. And what is the barrier to entry? It's the design managers, right, that are hiring these folks, and these design managers. How old are they? Generally speaking, right?
Oh, pretty
They're
young.
like
Pretty young.
my age. Really, they're young. Because in what I've dealt with in I guess larger companies is that the design managers are typically like my age that came from like print and graphic design, or they are influenced by CEOs that are also older or have a traditional way of thinking about looking at pretty stuff. That's what I've seen is that these, just like you were talking about with these posts, right, looking for visual design, they're looking for something to look pretty. They're not really talking about the usability because most likely their chief product officer or their PM is going to drive the UX, right?
Right.
They're going to make the decisions about, okay, this needs to be a table versus this needs to be a list, right? That's supposed to be a UX designer doing that. It's not supposed to be a
Yeah.
PM that's doing that, right? So that's probably what's happening is that these jobs and roles that are coming out, they're saying visual design, and many of them are doing it as you're pointing out. So all the people that are being hired are visual design people, as I've I guess been saying, because those visual design people are like, oh, I do visual design, I do visual design, I do visual design. Um, those people are being hired into UX roles, and they don't
Yeah.
actually know UX because they were hired for visual design, and the role for actual UX doesn't exist because the hiring manager doesn't want it to exist or doesn't know it exists or is taking up that role themselves. Right? They're like, oh, I can do that. I know what the user wants, even though they're completely biased, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably where we're probably missing each other in the dark, right? It's like I'm talking about the people who have already been hired, while you're talking about the people who are looking for roles that are looking at
Yes.
these job postings and going, "Oh, they're looking for visual people. I'm not visual. I'm focusing on UX," and that sucks.
That's a really interesting point. I think you're right, actually, because I'm looking at it from a recruiter's perspective of helping candidates find work and also working with founders and hiring managers who are like, I just want some kind of visual focused designer, somebody who's high craft. Cool. Awesome. So your background's also really interesting in that. So you're a design engineer now. And how did that happen?
So I'll give you a little anecdote first. Is that I was given the title of design engineer back in 2001, and that was when I graduated high school. To show you my age a little bit. Uh, so not obviously not officially. I never even considered it as a real role. Obviously back then it was, and it also had nothing to do with what I do now. I used to build the homecoming floats for my class every year and design and build them. And because I designed and built them every year, they gave me like their own, like instead of being like class president, class vice president, treasurer, or whatever, I was class design engineer. That I was the only ever one of them. Um, so it was cute, this role that's come out now in the last couple of years of design engineer going, oh, I've had this role before you guys ever even decided this role existed. Um, and it's really interesting because I actually I don't actually consider myself in terms of strictly design engineer. I consider myself UX engineer, and there's a very slight difference, and it has to do with UX, right? Before we had this title of design engineer, just before, we used to actually have two roles. There used to be a role called UX engineer that Microsoft and Google had some career ladders for, and then you would see a role called design technologist. And design technologist or creative technologist, you'd see the same one. Um, that wouldn't be at Microsoft or Google. They would be at like startups and or more likely like agencies and those kind of shops where you're trying to be creative and have to use technology to be creative. So like an RGA would have a creative technologist. So that delimitation between those two roles, I really aligned with because the UX engineer was in my mind meant for like app development, very closely related to design systems and making sure that things are consistent and aligning to like a product and a strategy that way versus the design technologist or a creative technologist, which would be more like, I need something pretty and I need it to be interactive and I need it in 6 weeks, right? So like, or maybe even 2 weeks, let's say for the agency life. So like you would have very different expectations for both those roles. But now, because these roles are becoming more popular and people are like, oh, well, I'm not really doing UX, I'm more creative. So I want to be like, a design engineer is kind of what's happening, it looks like. We've kind of melded these two roles together in design engineer, such that design engineer is that person who does design and engineering together as a single unit. And it's the exact same kind of problem that we had with full stack engineering because at the moment right now we used to have something called front end engineering and back end engineering, where front end engineer would be all about the browser, back end engineer would be all about like making APIs and databases and all of this stuff. Now we have full stack engineer, which says, okay, I do a little bit of front end, a little bit of back end. We don't know how much. Usually it's a lot of back end, a little front end, but we don't know how much. But they've molded those two things together. It's the exact same thing that happened in design engineering. They melded the design and the engineering together. And the big problem with that, of course, is that while it looks good to have like a jack of all trades that does all the things in one spot, you lose a lot of the expertise in that. Right? If you have a full stack engineer that claims they could do CSS, you're lucky if they could do like put two boxes next to each other and center them. Right? Like it's very hard for them to do because they've been writing APIs most likely, and
Right.
maybe they'll do a front end. Um, so yeah, I think that's where the design engineer kind of sits, is that I appreciate that the role is there for people like me, but I think it's becoming a little muddy about the stuff that I'd rather be focusing on, which is again the UX part of it all.
So there are a ton of design engineering jobs out there right now, and it's
Hmm.
like a very coveted role for quite a few folks. And even at the
Yeah,
meetup we were at, there was like 70 or 80 people there. It was insane, and they were all working
awesome.
at top companies like Netflix, Facebook, Meta, and HBO, etc. So it's like a it's definitely it feels like it's a growing role out there, and
Oh
there's
yeah.
a ton of content out there talking about how designers should be builders, design engineers. Like you don't want to be doing UX anymore. How did that happen exactly, and and why? Like is and you're saying it's kind of not a great thing in some ways.
It's not a great thing that the roles of UX engineer and design technologist have molded into one thing. I kind of wish that they were separate in the same way that I will be, an old man and say that I wish front end development and back end development were separate because they're not anymore.
But design and engineer
That's why full
can be
stack is so
together.
popular now.
But design and engineering can be together. Like you're not unhappy about designer engineering melding. It's just design technologist and design engineer melding. You're like, that's not great.
Right. I'm saying the UX engineer and design technologist going together as one role called design engineer. I don't like personally the same way that I don't like the title of full stack engineer. I'd rather people hire things like specifically for what they need, but it isn't realistic, especially in startup worlds where you're just like, I need someone to do everything. So I need someone who does full front end and back end. I want to hire full stack. I want someone who does UX and creative stuff. Let me put that together into one role called design engineering and hire that. Right. So like I understand where it is. Um, but like it's the hiring generalist versus specialist, right? To get off the ground, you want your generalist. But once you're off the ground and you're running, you kind of want specialists to go ahead and come in and make sure that things are accessible, usable, localized, all the other things that are going to help your usability go up that your initial MVP wouldn't necessarily have at the time. So, like I said, I support UX engineering. I support design technologists. I support design engineering as a whole as um, I guess, a practice that I think is important in the industry. But I really wish it didn't merge like it did. That's the only like comment that I have on it.
Got it. Do you feel like where do you think design engineering is going to go in the next few years? Because
Huh.
it's definitely very hot right now, and it feels like a lot of designers are like, I want to learn how to code so I can be a builder, a design engineer. And it's ironic because it feels like, if you're an early stage startup, you should be hiring for generalists, which is what's happening. But most startups aren't hiring a design engineer yet, or maybe they just aren't aware of it. And most of the design engineering roles I'm seeing are actually for very large companies
Yeah.
who should be hiring specialists, but instead they're just like, let's flatten it a little bit or meld a little bit and go for design engineers.
You know what's funny about that? I was on the Design Systems Office Hours podcast last year, and we were talking about design technologists or design engineering or whatever. And on that podcast, I mentioned another podcast that that happened a few weeks before, and that podcast was by well, it was the Rid Design podcast, like Dive
Yeah, yeah.
Deep Dive or
Dive
whatever.
Club.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Dive Club. So on that podcast, they had a person talking about design engineering, and I saw a clip, and um, what's his name? Michael, who's the host of the show.
Rittering, yeah,
Um,
Michael Rittering.
uh, yeah. So Michael asked this person. He says, "Hey, where do you see design engineering in the next couple of years? In the future of design engineering?" Just like you asked, and that person said, "Oh, it's just a phase." And I wanted to, I just wanted to like throw my computer. I'm like, we just got here, right? I'm like, we just got this stupid freaking role that people are now hiring us, right? Originally, it was just like big companies like Google and Microsoft. Now we're
Yeah.
seeing a lot more. And this guy, whoever the hell this guy is like, oh, it's just a phase. It'll go away.
Oh,
So I'm
I gotta
like,
find
I
him.
got to know what the rest of this. Yeah, I wanted to go ahead and strangle him, but if you listen to the rest of that interview, first off, it's the head of design engineering for Vercel responding to this. Okay, so immediately you're like, oh, hold on a second, this is a hot take that's coming, and it is. It is. It's something that needs more context. And what he goes on to say is that the reason why he believes it's a fad goes along with the transition of designers going more and more into actually making things interactive and finally making them work, right? So there's been a huge like barrier to entry for a long time of getting interactive things that you have in your mind, things that you want to create, and actually making them, right?
Yeah.
It's much easier for you to like, draw it out on a piece of paper or more modernly make it in some design program, but it's a lot harder to actually make it work up until more recently. More recently, you could ask AI, and there's tools, Figma, Framer, all these things that are already providing designers ways of making their stuff interactive, almost to the ability of not needing an engineer any longer. So what he was kind of saying is that there is a world where a designer is a design engineer. That's what they do because it it is no longer good enough to just design the thing. It also needs to work. And that's I think what he's finally getting at in that comment is that design engineering as a phase is just a phase of saying there are des- designers, myself included, who were ahead of the curve. The whole reason why I do engineering and I've been hired to do engineering and why I started doing engineering was because I wanted to make stuff interactive. I wanted my stuff as designer back in the late 90s to actually do stuff. When I found out about making websites back in the late 90s, making animated GIFs and slicing up Photoshop files, I was so hooked. I have websites that are so interesting looking, and I'm patting myself on the back, I know, but so interesting and so interactive back then that really pushed the envelope about the things that I could do now. That now, like CSS is just a natural language to me. That I could just knock it out, and I know exactly how things are going to, behave without needing to like toggle back and forth on my browser to see like what's happening. So that takes a lot of practice. You don't need that practice anymore here in the year 2025. There's stuff that just does it. I could type into ChatGPT and be like, "Hey, I need this approach." And at this point now, with the models improving, we can get somewhere really fast that works. That a designer doesn't need to wait for an engineer to do the thing. So the more and more experience they get, whether it's through ChatGPT or otherwise, the more that designers will actually just turn into design engineers.
So let's say you're a designer who doesn't know how to code at all, and
Hmm.
you're seeing this happen where designers are becoming builders, where they're making things that just work. Do you learn code? Should you learn code at this point, or should you just go with the wave and just kind of wait for AI to improve to a point where you can just build stuff?
The age-old question: should designers code? I'm on the
Yeah.
side of designers should code, but and here's the but: designers should code does not mean that your job should be coding. It means that you should code to learn about the medium that you're working in. Okay. It's the exact same kind of analogy of thinking about, okay, I'm a painter, and sure, I could, find some color over here and paint this wall or paint this canvas and it'll look okay. But a really good painter is going to know the right paint to use with the right medium, right? And you're going to learn about those mediums. You're going to learn that, like, I don't know, uh, let's call like acrylic paint isn't good for the moleskin canvas as an example, right? I don't know that for sure because I'm not a painter. But in order for you to know that, you're going to know you need to know about your medium. And a good way of course, doing that, the best way, of course, doing that is as and people do this is that they would make their own paints or make their own canvases, right? And once they do that stuff, and that's going very deep into this whole thing. And I'm not necessarily
Yeah.
again saying that a designer must make your entire new website. I'm not saying that. What I am saying though is that you should learn about the oil-based paint versus the acrylic paint. You should learn about the moleskin canvas versus I don't know, synthetic canvas, right? You should learn about what the good combinations are and how the medium is meant to work. Once you learn about the medium, you'll present and create better works of art. Period. Period. Im- that's what's going to end up happening. So it's the exact same thing digitally. If you are just thinking that the web is just basically Photoshop, and I can go ahead and draw some rectangles and it'll look pretty, you're not understanding the medium. Once you understand the medium, the way that the page lays out boxes, the way that the topography lays itself out, the way that images are loaded, things are like that, you're going to be a better designer for that medium.
Hmm.
And that's why I think designers should code in terms of learning the medium. Again, I'm not saying that it should be their new job. I'm not saying that they need to start making websites now on a regular basis, but I am saying that they need to learn their medium. And that's the bottom line.
Got it. That's yeah, you're probably right. I think that's a very, very diplomatic take on this, and it makes quite a bit of sense. Where do you see yourself going in the next few years if things change the way it does right now? Like, do you feel like you need to pick up certain new skills, or
Um,
if so,
the problem
which
is, I guess,
skills?
I problem is for me, as I'm an old man and I don't change anything. I'm still writing CSS like it was 10, 20 years ago. Um, so in that way, it took me a real long time to just even be comfortable picking up React, which is what I use for my day job. Like, I don't need React. I love the idea that I can just open up a Notepad exe, write a text file, and create a website right there. Like, I could still do that today, no problem. Um, and in fact, actually, Brad Frost did that just earlier this week. He had a live stream that he was like, "Screw it, I'm
Yeah.
making a website." So I'm lucky. I feel honored that I'm still able to do that. Um, so I'm old school when it comes to that stuff, but it doesn't mean that I don't adapt to new technologies that I think are going to help me. Like Astro, you would think that I got paid by Astro to speak about Astro as much as I do, but I love Astro as a framework. I think it really tugs on the strings of us old web timey people who, you know, there were things that when we would build sites that were really annoying that we kind of wish like, oh, this could have been better. Like HTML templates, like we would have loved HTML templates back 20 years ago to reuse stuff, right? Astro just kind of does it very easily within its framework, in a very kind of intuitive way for us old timey people, which is really nice. So, um, you know, there is definitely a requirement to learn new things that's out there, absolutely. But it's the thing that I think I would pause on is like immediately jumping on the bandwagon of the latest and greatest like framework or app, right? Just because something gets popular, just because some influencer said, "Hey, look at this thing," doesn't mean it's the right way to go. In fact, I think like uh, um, Scott on the Syntax podcast for the engineering folks, he was ranting and raving and being like, "Oh, look at this web app! It's so fast because all the stuff is in the client." And I responded on the thing in Blue Sky. I said, "Wait a minute, are we going to send all the JavaScript to the client again? I thought we were beyond that. I thought we all decided that it was better to request individual web pages. That's what the web was for, right? And we have engineering enhancements that make that a good thing as opposed to shoving a whole bunch of JavaScript on the client's page and hoping that the JavaScript runs, right? So I was just so taken aback by a person who has thousands of followers posting that now this is a good idea to put stuff in the client. I saw another thing on YouTube earlier this week that was recommending to use the 62.5% font size hack. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, that's an awful recommendation for so many reasons. I have an entire blog post describing why that's awful. And it was okay at the time because we didn't know any better. But now, 2025, no one would recommend that any longer. So, that's the kind of stuff that you have to be very careful about because there's a lot of information out there, but you have to be careful about like really thinking about, where the benefits are and the history, which is lost in a lot of cases. Just a guy yelling out or person yelling out and saying, "Hey, I found this cool thing," even though It's not good. So got to be careful.
Except for Astro. That one's good.
Look, I'm biased. I think Astro's good. I think Astro's
uh,
good. Ooh,
yeah, Melissa Gerson asked a great question. How do designers filter out the trendy noise? There's a lot of noise out there in terms of which tools to
there is a lot
use.
of
Everyone's
noise.
recommending stuff, especially with
The
AI.
answer is the answer is it's half experience, which is something you're just going to have to get through, right? But the other half, I want to say, is a little bit of common sense. You really have to have a critical thinking cap on when you see a recommendation, right? I think that's the thing that's going to save a lot of people out there when they're looking at some of this stuff. Granted, right? Like when you see the single page app that's running through a whole bunch of pages really fast, and it like, oh wow, that's so fast, it must be great, right? If you haven't gone through why we went from single page applications to what we have now, which is again, basically page requests. If you haven't gone through that and had the experience for that, it's hard to see why that's a bad thing, right? It's hard to see why using a design grid is a bad thing on the web. I have an entire website, which is Gridless
Gridless
Design,
dot
that talks about
design.
why, right? That talks about why that's a bad idea. But it's hard to see that because traditionally, a designer, you've been using a grid your whole time. And if the web doesn't have a grid, well, holy shit, how am I supposed to put any designs on this website? Well, there's very much a way to do that. And you need to, of course, kind of use that critical thinking and say, hold on a second, why isn't there a grid in the web? Right. And once you put that on, when you start thinking that, you say, well, hold on a second, why isn't there a grid? Let me find out why there isn't a grid. Why doesn't it come with a grid initially? And for the folks that are like, oh, well, this CSS grid, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the design grid. It's different. But you have to think about it. Say, why doesn't that exist already? Right? Why doesn't the thing that you are now presenting not exist already? Right? And when you think about that and you go through the steps of the motions of saying, well, why doesn't this exist already? You'll find out why. You'll find out why it doesn't exist already. And you can do that critical thing and say, actually, maybe that's not a good idea. You're muted.
I said thank you so much because the hour just flew right by, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much. I definitely want to continue chatting with you. This has been just such a pleasure. I've learned so much, and you've given me a history of design technologists and design engineering that I had no context in previously. So thank you for that. I hope to see you around in person pretty soon. So yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Whatever next event you're going to be at, I'll be there. You just let me know. And it was great talking with you too. Thanks for inviting me on. I'm open to chat whenever too. Like you want to do some digital stuff, I'm all about it. Love it.
that'd be awesome. Thank you so much, Donnie. And folks, please donate if you haven't had a chance to. We're still at 108 donations and $15,512. Thank you so much if you donated already. But if you haven't yet, please hit that donation button. Use the QR code on the bottom right. We really appreciate it. It'll go so far in helping Tiffany rebuild her home. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Donnie. I hope to see you soon. Take care. Next, we have Maria Pentkovski. She's the VP or the head of design at OutSchool. So, Maria, you're in backstage right now. Would you mind giving a thumbs up if you're ready?
Hello.
Hey, Maria. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I've been watching you today and yesterday, and just amazing set of folks who've come and shared their perspectives. And some cases, I feel like there's some controversy in opinions. It's been really fun.
Thank you so much. I've been so lucky. Like people have really stepped up to come on as guests and help us raise a ton of money. So we hit about $700 so far, $1,000 yesterday, and hopefully we'll get to 1,000 by the end of the day today. So thank you so much for coming on as well. I know you're super busy with all your work, and it's probably like dark and everything. So yeah, thank you so much.
No, I'm super stoked to be here. I'm in California, so it's still daytime over here. But again, thank you for doing this. Hey, I know it's late for you, and you've really been jamming. So I'm really excited to be a part of this and a part of conversation and help a really great cause.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Folks, if you're listening, tuning in right now, please hit the donation button or check the QR code on the bottom right. We're at $15,000 and 512, 60%. And we've had about 40 donations since we started this live stream uh, marathon, I would say a day ago. So, yeah, Maria, I have so many questions. We have like so many things to talk about. So, I know you
Do it.
also work as a career coach on the side, and you've been doing that for several years. And I actually have spoken with a few folks that you've coached before, and they've all said really
Nice.
great
That's great.
things. So I want to ask you, what is like a common issue that most people bring to you?
Oh, that's a great question. So, my career coaching is really an evolution of my career long dedication to giving back to the design community. I spent 10 years teaching in two different art schools, and I'm a product of an art school myself. It always kind of focused in the career development, portfolio development space. So, it kind of naturally evolved. I even worked in motion graphics department for 5 years, and worked with students building demo reels and such. So career coach that design, and my practice as a consultant is really an outcome of that. And we work with designers of all walks of life in terms of the design landscape, early career design leaders, everybody in between. Obviously, product and UX is a large slice of the pie, but by far not all of our client base. We have folks in motion design and brand. We even have some industrial designers
Whoa.
on the platform, and we're open. If you're in design field and you're in creative or practical or whatever, we have either myself or the other two great coaches we have on the platform are here to address your journey. And that's what we do. We basically pair up with our clients and work with them in a very personalized way, very much like you would work with your financial advisor or maybe an immigration attorney, where they get to understand your situation and come up with a strategy, long-term, short-term, to address your needs. And everybody's need is different. I think in many ways our needs are influenced by the time that we live in, right? So obviously there was, I think you referred to it as the golden era of design, right? The Brian was talking about earlier, like, right before COVID, through COVID, and where we are today and where we have been in the last couple of years has been a very different time. And the problems and the goals that the designers have during these periods differ. So when we first started, when I was just me, myself, I was kind of side hustling it. When I first started doing this after the classroom was just no longer there during COVID, like everything, my curriculum, I was at Academy of Art University at that time, was there for 5 years. I'm an alumni of the school, so I have a lot in my heart for that institution. But when the classroom got stripped away, it was just natural that I would kind of transition and really get into this one-on-one space that I felt I was very successful in getting results. Even while teaching. So transitioned it to consulting. And in that time, because they were like jobs falling out of the sky, right? Like every one of us were getting reached out to almost daily, if not multiple times a day, by recruiters. I think during that time, my own job search, I talked to every single company other than Apple. I've never talked to Apple in my whole entire career. So if anybody from Apple is listening, I don't know why you never talked to me, but I've never talked to Apple. But at that time, all the designers that were coming to us, we were helping negotiate offers. I was helping negotiate
Yeah.
offers. I was helping get through the final round of portfolio reviews and getting really ready for managing multiple interviews at the same time. That was a very common problem, or whatever the problem we were solving.
What a
What's been
horrible problem.
Yeah, but in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of tears,
Yeah.
and like there's been a lot of heartache and layoffs. And I think in many ways, us coaches, we go beyond just providing career advice, but kind of offering life advice during this time, because we just know that a lot of our clients, they just need somebody to like listen to them, and even if we don't have an immediate answer, to know that they have somebody who really supports them through this time. So the problems really have changed
Yeah.
over time, but the support that the coaches are providing continues to be a lot. And very valuable.
So what's like the biggest problem right now for product designers who kind of make up the majority of the audience right now?
Yeah, it's I would say the more on the junior or the first half of your career kind of journey side, folks are just not getting interviews. What am I
Yeah.
doing wrong? And it's really portfolio optimization. On more of senior up, and particularly those folks with some fancy logos on their resume. I watched your live broadcast about that last week with Peter. That was really great. A lot of truth to that. So I think some folks who are just classified as more hireable, for them, it's it's very competitive. So how do I make sure I get through that interview? How do I get to the offer stage? A lot of people just don't get to the offer stage. It's kind of heartbreaking. They go through month long, like 3-4 months long, sometimes interview processes, and a lot of them get to that final round just to get rejected. And it's even more painful when later they see, like in LinkedIn or whatever, the person who actually got the job, and they're like, ouch, they got the job because they do have some fancier logos on their resume or whatnot, right? So there's a lot of kind of transparency and ambiguity in this process that's happening right now.
So when they come to you and they're having an issue with, say, getting the offer, and they already have certain names in your resume that kind of propels them early on, but they kind of get stuck near the end. How do you typically work with them to figure out where it is that they need to improve in order to get the offer?
If it's at the very last stage, that usually means that they already passed through the portfolio review. So it's probably
Uh-huh.
not the portfolio. It's more of the behavioral one-on-ones that usually kind of fall in that last round. This is where they're
Yeah.
like, are you going to be able to roll with our team and the way that things work here? So in that case, what we try to, again, we're very personalized. So what we try to do, and my method is, I really extend my network to help out. I look in to see who do I know who works in these companies, or even if I don't, I look at the teams, particularly because we know who is going to be interviewing them. You get, the recruiter will send you the schedule. Luckily, if you don't get it, make sure you ask for it.
Yeah.
And you research the people who are going to be interviewing you, and you try to not only speak well to answering their questions, but tailor your answers to what they're kind of what's valuable to them, right? Product managers are looking for your ability of your product thinking and strategic thinking, where engineering manager who you may be interviewing with just wants to know, are you able to transition your design work and create your Figma files in a way that's going to make their life easy when they're building your designs, right? So I think at the very end, it's this really being able to confidently have conversations with all of these one-on-one settings, and with these cross-functional or even peer partners, in a way that you position yourself as a good partner to them who would actually bring value to them versus become a problem in their existence.
Right. So when you're looking through people's LinkedIn profiles, I mean, obviously, like, they're an engineer versus a PM, and you're like, okay, this is how you should tailor it. But when it comes to design interviewers, can you kind of like walk us through how you would figure out how to prepare for someone based on their LinkedIn profile if they're a designer?
Yeah.
Because I think that's like very nuanced. Whereas like engineer, like, okay, deliverables, product managers, product strategy. With
Yeah.
designers, there's so many different types, and you probably have to prepare a little bit differently. Is it based on like where they worked before? So oh, they worked at Apple, so their design philosophy is going to be this way versus something else, or is it something completely different?
Yeah, I think it's definitely that, right? It's where they worked before, particularly if we have some insight into the culture of those organizations, because it could be their value. What is the bar for craft, right? That's the big theme. Like, how does that fit in? Or if you see that person has worked in some super technical, I don't know, like Okta or something like this. Like, are you able to speak more of that talk, even though you are on the design side? Can you understand the subject matter that the product is within? I would also say that it's a lot of the design leaders, they like when we started in this career, there was no product or UX design, right? But then again, and my career dates back like 20 years. Now, a lot of the design leaders are also newer and frankly younger than me now, and they maybe do have like HCI degrees. So I also look at the person's background and say, are they coming from a visual design background? Do they have an agency background? Or have they been like born and bred for product work, right? Because I think those are two different types of designers and design leaders and design managers, and they're looking for slightly different things.
Do you feel like people just mostly hire designers that are similar to them at that point?
Oh, God, I hope not. I hope that at least myself as a hiring manager, what I really look for is who is the right person for this team within this company, right? And I think it varies. There's certain aspects of the team that are consistent, but then there are also aspects of it that differ from organization to organization. Maybe it's the way that it's the leadership is, or the design leadership is. But at the same time, certain aspects, obviously, like camaraderie and building a team and all of that. So I would hope that we are really trying to find the right person for the team versus for ourselves.
So how would that apply though? Like if you find somebody from an agency background, wouldn't you assume that they might be looking for designers who operate similarly to them because that's their value system in terms of like what's a good designer versus a less good designer? Or do you believe they're able to kind of flip that and think about it outside that perspective and realize this is the needs of the team and we have to emphasize that as opposed to my own value judgment of what's considered a good designer?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually look at the agents. Like when I see somebody who worked in an agency, that's not how I view it. I am more looking at it, okay, they worked in an agency. Visual design probably matters. They're also probably really good at pitching their work to clients, which translates pitching to executive suite in an organization. So what I would really advise my client in the case where they're going to be interviewing somebody who like spend their a good chunk of their career at like Huge or something like this, I would say your craft bar like needs to be there. Even in a one-on-one, you'll probably get some questions around that. And also, they're really going to be looking at this conversation that they're having with you more than just a conversation between the two of you, but they're going to be kind of auditioning you as how you would be able to have these conversations with executive suite or pitching an idea to a partner from a different part of the organization or whatever it may be.
Thank you. Could you talk a bit about how you coach somebody for behavioral questions? Because I feel like that's always a really difficult thing to learn. Do you typically just kind of like practice with them one-on-one, or is like more material that they need to consume beforehand?
Yeah, so there's a few things. I think there's everybody should have a little cheat sheet, I think, to start out with, because a lot of times when you go and you interview in these different companies with these different people, I would say more than half of the questions will be consistent, right? So rather than like thinking it and you think you say, like have something that you already like get your pitch ready. And again, I worked in an agency for a little bit as well, so I kind of learned how to pitch my work and myself. And I think that is something that I tell my clients, okay, tell me about yourself, right? Everybody gets that question. I usually frame it as like, tell me about your career journey. What has it been like? I really want them to tell me like what that road was or has been to now and what brings you here. Why this company? Because again, every company is different, every team is different, and I'm really looking for them to be the right fit for the team. So some of those questions are common, like more of the junior folks, they get asked like, what is your design process? How do you work with product managers? And then you get into a more spicy ones of tell me about a time when, right? Everybody has gotten those questions. Or an even more spicy one when they were like, well, what is your weakness? What are the area of growth that you want to invest in? And that one is a really hard one because you're like, well, I can be honest and show them that I recognize that there's areas that I still need to improve in myself, but is it gonna like pinpoint a particular area that they actually need me to be really great at, and is it gonna cost me this job, right? So I think when you're thinking answers of these questions on the spot, it becomes a little bit challenging, and you may even say something that later you wish you would take back, right? So I would say have a cheat sheet where you have some of these common questions that you pre-write those answers, and before you go into a particular interview, you really look at those pitches that you put together and you tweak them a little bit to really, fit the company and the person you're going to be speaking with. Right. So those are the kind of like initial work that the designer would do themselves. Right. And then working with the coach, we would absolutely practice that. What I noticed works really well is I started using Fathom AI recorder, which is like magical, right? So we do a mock interview. It records everything. It takes notes. And then I send that video to my client and then they watch themselves. I know you did something similar.
It's so painful.
It is so painful, but you are your own biggest critic.
Yeah.
And you're going to pick on the things from the things that you said that maybe you want to say in a different way, to your posture and really everything in between, because at the end, like usually it has to just like you have to kind of hit off every single thing to come out of the interview and be like, oh my God, I feel like I nailed it. In today's market, you can come out and you feel like you nailed it and then you can still get rejected. That's just how sad markets are today.
So in today's market, where do you think most designers are kind of like failing in the process? Like what's the biggest stumbling block?
I think the one thing that I've noticed and that's consistent in all of the clients that I work with, whether in good times or the bad times, is confidence. Every single one of us
that's so hard.
is lacking confidence, myself included.
Yeah.
Right? And it costed me job interviews as well, where I just don't bring my A game. And being a design leader, it actually becomes even more critical because you're a leader, you got to be confident, right? And as being a woman design leader, you have to come off as like this woman of steel with a heart of gold. And I once made a mistake where I scheduled my own call, 9 a.m. interview. And with the head of design, it was my final round in the whole long loop after 3 months of interviewing. And she was great. I'm not going to say the company out loud. I want to bust them out on myself out. But I blew it just because I demonstrated myself to be a bit more vulnerable than the role really called for at that moment. And I think that confidence shows itself in a different way for a different level and different role that you're interviewing for. But you have to be confident in what you say, in your work, in why you deserve to be here. Like you deserve to be interviewing for this job. And if they hire you, they're going to benefit so much. But you don't be arrogant. You do it in a way you got to be humble, but you still got to really let them know that by having you join their team, they're gonna gain a whole lot because you really know your shit.
So confidence isn't just like you saying the confident terms like I'm great or you'd be so lucky. Well, that's arrogance. You'd be lucky if you were to work with me or something. But more just like just presenting your ideas in a way that comes across well. And so much of that is just like how you feel though.
You have to believe in yourself. I think that's the hardest part, where you have to look in yourself in the mirror and feel confident.
How do you do that? Like, how do you get yourself psyched through before an interview? Because for me, like me personally, I have good days and I have bad days.
Absolutely.
And the good days, I could do no wrong. And I just I hope and pray when I'm going in the final round interview, like this is the good day.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a bad day. And I just I can feel myself just like tanking, like word by word, things are just going downhill, and I have to like reset my mind in the moment and be like, okay, snap out of it, like try to resuscitate this interview. But like, how do you? What's your recommendation or your advice?
Yeah, it's an existential question. And I think in many ways, it happens in different parts of society. Like, I like to watch baseball. And usually when they're like down by like 10 in the second inning, it can really fall apart. And like the remainder of the game can be just really painful. My son, who is now a grown-up, he used to play Little League. And I remember when they lose their confidence in the early of the game, it's just going to be depressing for everybody. And it's the same thing with interview. Once you start feel like you're like, oh, I screwed up, unless you like recover, right? And you don't have a coach who's like, oh, go, you got this. Like, you have to figure it all out. I think for me, there is just a few there's a few tactical things that I put together for myself. Like, I realized I'm not good with 9 a.m. interviews. Just don't schedule them, right? I kind of put my window for interviews like 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. I don't want to be after 3, even though I always tell my clients, prepare your portfolio presentation as if you're going to present it at 4 p.m. on a Friday, which is a great advice, I think. But this is kind of like I said, okay, no early morning interviews, no late in the afternoon interviews. I'm also very like, I know how my body reacts to caffeine, and I use it to my advantage versus disadvantage. And I definitely have seen both of it. So I know that I need to drink a cup of coffee 30 minutes before that interview. So then it will, and I know the right amount, right? So you don't want to do too much, because then you're gonna, be wigging out, and that's not good, right? And that kind of gives me the tactical and the physical kind of fuel to know that I'm gonna go. Now, when it comes to like portfolio presentations, dude, practice it. Like, you got to practice it over and over and over and over to the point where it feels natural. And how it will feel natural is that I write a script for my presentation. I try not to read off of it, but I think my presentation is like earlier in its existence, and it's the first couple of interviews that I showing it as. I probably am going to read it a little bit more than later. And then after you really get to the point of being super comfortable with what you are presenting, you shouldn't need those notes at all, because it's exactly what you're talking about. And also, like, build it in a way where every interview you go to and you're going to get questions asked, try to proactively answer them in your presentation, because this way you actually control the time a little bit better versus somebody ambushing you with a question that will require you like jump back and forth in the slides and try to address things. So if you have a really solid story and you really address all of the possible things that you may get asked, and your stuff, that would make you feel confident. I got to the point where my presentation, where even if it didn't get me the job interview, I was still so confident that it's a good presentation because of the feedback that I got on it directly, like great storytelling, great. And I knew that I didn't get that job, not because of the presentation, it's something else. So then you kind of check that off for yourself. So there's nothing to worry about there. Just go and do your thing. And then in the interviews of one-on-ones, those are kind of a variable, because you don't really know who you're going to get, right? You may get somebody super outgoing, and whenever I interview somebody, I try to make them really comfortable, and that usually makes them feel a bit more at ease. And frankly, me as a hiring manager enables me to kind of see what they are more naturally about, because I want them to tell me what I want to hear, right? Like that's a fail. I want you to be yourself, and then I want you to match what I'm looking for. But you never know. Like, I've definitely had interviews where I'm like, there is like literally nothing that I'm saying that I can see is resonating with this person. And at that point, you're like, well, it's not even about confidence or not confidence. This is just not a good match, because you want to go in the team where you're going to be a match. And imagine if that's how they are in an interview, imagine working with this person.
So at that point, you just call it a loss and kind of...
You have to sometimes. Yeah. I mean, it hurts, right? Nothing stings more than a job rejection, right? But if you, at least in the interview, you knew you kind of tanked it in the interview, then it's not going to sting so bad when you actually going to get that email. It always hurts more than when you think you nailed it. And then at 1 a.m. workday shoots out an email at you like, we decided to go with somebody else, you'd be like, hey, what happened?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've gotten pretty good at just forgetting the interview happened right after the interview,
Ooh.
except
You
when I
gave me
screw
that
up.
advice. You gave that advice to me, which I appreciate. I don't know if I can forget about it, but yeah.
Well, except when I screw up, and then that just lives in my mind rent free for like several days because I'm like, okay, how could I improve on this? But it also just it's incredibly painful because you know exactly where you screwed up,
But
and
you
you know that.
learn from those mistakes, though, right? Don't they carry with you forever? And then you're like, it actually shapes the kind of designer or interviewer you are.
Oh yeah, yeah. I some of the mistakes I've made, it still haunts me, but I know not to make them again. So yeah, for
Definitely.
sure. So moving backwards a little bit, because the hardest thing right now, I think, for a lot of designers is getting their portfolio right. And I know you got a lot of hot takes on this one. So just throw some of them out. What's a hot take you got for portfolios? And by the way, you're at the VP level. Do you still need a portfolio at your level?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I know you had a conversation yesterday that was you asked a similar question, and you do need a portfolio, and all of the job applications and ATSs they ask for a portfolio link. There's actually only one company in my last job search street that I talked to who did not require they required a portfolio to get, for the application, but they didn't require it in a presentation format. So you need it to submit for an application, and then you need the presentation, which is actually for design leaders is even more critical because it's your storytelling, it's the strategy, it's everything, where your website is more of just a digital face to who you are. It's like your online business card. So for myself, and I keep my website under password, but even for those folks who get in with a password, I don't have any case studies in my portfolio. I just have front-facing cards saying this is the type of work that I've done, and it's more of like my story of where I've been. But I don't dive in. Where for designers, the practitioners, like those case studies are really important at the portfolio level, and the way that you tell your story and how you tell it visually in the context of your portfolio speaks to all those things that you're going to have to back up again when you do the presentation, which is your ability to understand your audience. Obviously, people who are viewing your website, they're the same people, but they're in different context than them being there when you're presenting. Your voiceover matters. Website doesn't have a voiceover, right? So how do you create your website in the sense where it demonstrates your ability to understand your audience, to storytell, to demonstrate your personal brand, right? And the brand is not your colors or your logo, right? Those are like attributes of the brand, but what are you all about? What is your value proposition? What makes you any different than anybody else that like piques my interest to want to learn more? And then your storytelling of the case study, right? Are you like nobody's gonna read your case study top to bottom. Like you're never gonna see a party manager like eating a burrito, reading your case study during lunch. They're just not. I mean, maybe somebody does, but I think in most cases, most commonly, it's kind of like you scan it through. You scan it through. You read the parts that are interesting to you. You look at the images to substitute for some of the parts that are maybe too wordy, and you feel like the image translates what they're saying. But ultimately, you see, okay, are all the pieces in there for me to grasp that this person went through the right process, did the due diligence for all the highs and the lows of the double diamonds and process, whatever it may be, and it's not the same for everyone. And did they ultimately reach a thoughtful solution, right, that made some kind of an impact? And we kind of look in case studies that way.
So if we don't read case studies, we still require words to be in there. Like if you saw a case study without any words, you'd be like, what the hell? And you
Yeah.
probably pass on it. But like,
Yep.
how do you skim? Like, what are you skimming to right away? And what are you digging deeper into?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I spend a lot of time in my career working in top of the funnel conversion working very closely with marketing teams, and it was a very similar problem that we were solving there.
Right.
Right? We wanted to communicate what we're all about, like where you're at, what this is, and why should you care, right? And that is in different pages of your portfolio do that, right? Your homepage very much needs to do that. It's the face to your portfolio. It's not your work, it's glimpses of your work. That's why it's really important, in my opinion, to have your portfolio like projects in the homepage, so nobody has to go and look for the work or portfolio button and then find your work somewhere else. It needs to be there, and I want to see your work before I see your face. I feel like, it's if you were going for a modeling career, that's great. I think for design leaders, it's a little bit of a different jam, and because you already kind of established yourself. But for a designer, a practitioner earlier in their career, your work is really important. So have that be really close to when I get there, and give me a value proposition again that makes you stand apart. What is it? And don't tell me like, oh, product designer, coffee lover. Like, I don't. That's great.
Empathetic.
Right, exactly. Or
Yeah.
very creative, solve problems. Like, yeah, like, no, duh. Like, you should be all of those things. But what is it about you? Give me a little quick glimpse, like some stats, 10 plus years at Spotify, Netflix, and Acme Co. I don't know, right? But give me something to want to learn more, and really beautiful portfolio cards that give me a glimpse into to cover your book. It's just like, great novels are words, but covers is what sells them on New York Times best-selling list, right? Same thing with Netflix. Done a lot of studies with that for conversion. Different cover for
Yeah.
different movies makes them more clickable. And then in the case study itself, don't write a novel, right? I think you don't want to do that in your portfolio website, and you don't want to, you want to do it even less in your slide deck, because you could have a voiceover there. But you want to, and this is actually a really good skill to have, is to how to say more with less words, right? Whether it's in the design or the way that you're actually communicating. I've definitely have been in like meetings where designers pitching their work, and they're like going down this rabbit hole, and you start people picking up their phones and disconnecting, right? It's the same thing, even more. The attention span is even less when you are in a written in a website format without a voiceover. So make the content really relevant. So like, give me some headlines that make me like, oh, okay, this is the research part. Like if you're talking about user research, like pull out some quotes, highlight the relevant things. Don't highlight like 20 things in one paragraph, because then it just looks peppered and nothing stands out. But like, focus my attention on what you want me to be looking for me to do the thing that you want me to do while I'm here. Like if you want me to get the gist of the case study, enable me to scan it through and feel like I read it, even if I didn't.
I appreciate that. I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. We just had 2 donations come in from Lawanda and Melissa Gerson. Thank you so much, you both. Melissa, I'm going to see you around soon. I think she was at KTV karaoke last night with Michelle and Kim. Well, I couldn't make it, but thank you so much for coming out, supporting us, and also donating to Tiffany. So thank you so much. If anyone hasn't donated yet, please hit the QR code or the link in the comments and donate. We really appreciate everything. So, Maria, I feel like you say things that captivate you, like those words or those sentences that you scan and you're like, okay, this person sounds interesting. I want to dig deeper. Can you give us some examples of really good phrases that people are saying that just like get you almost every time? Because like we're all tired of the problem solver, empathetic design leader, or user centric problem solver, whatever it is that people typically throw out about designers, and you're like, yeah, of course you have to be that.
Yeah, really big kind of themes we're pursuing currently, and we're rebuilding kind of outschool platform to be more simple, and for for UX to be more effortless, right? So I think there's certain keywords that that are just hot and relevant, right? So simplicity, craft, right? That's the big one. I know it's like overused, but I think a good headline would be, and I have a few portfolios that I save. So let me just cheat, just because I think I have some super good ones. And I'm not going to name the person, but I like this one. He says, turning brave, bold ideas into meaningful human experiences. And then on below that, it said, his secondary headline, it says, from product and web design to shaping new brands and design systems, I'm anchored in strategy, research, and design, creating impactful and innovative digital experiences. It's a little bit fluffy on the bottom. I would prefer like a little bit stats, again, how many years and where you work. But I do like that main headline. And frankly, you know what? If you have like, if coming out of like Netflix, and you've been at Netflix for the last 5 years, and you've been working on a growth team at Netflix, you can actually get away with just stats, because that's already going to do a world of good. Growth practitioner, 5+ years at Netflix. It's just
Yeah.
it's whatever sells you to the person. You have to think what's important to them, and it's not about you. Like, I think that's the big mistake that designers, particularly those who are earlier in their career, they think their portfolio is like their bedroom, and they're going to decorate it in a way that really represents who they are. But that's actually a misconception, because your portfolio is a product. It's a marketing vessel to sell you in the way that you want to be perceived by another company.
So, why did that phrase resonate with you? The bold ideas.
I like the word brave even more than I do bold. So turning brave, bold ideas into meaningful human experiences. I think a lot of designers are not. We've been taught to, like in art school, and I know you went to art school. I went to art school. Like, we all had to be bold and creative and do these things, and we were actually, at least at the time that I went to school, which was in the early 2000s, we were applauded for it, right? We were
Yeah.
kind of groundbreaking and doing stuff like that. But when we got a job in a corporate world, we got shut down, right? Like, how many of us have been in a situation where you have this great idea, and then you pitch it, and then you're going to get multiple reasons from multiple teams telling you why this is not going to happen, or why this is not a bad idea. And when this happens over and over, you kind of get to a point where you're no longer brave, because it's almost kind of like a suicide mission to go out there with a bold idea. But I personally, as a design leader, I really value that bravery, and I really value the bold ideas, because that's what drives innovation. And I think particularly in the state of the industry that we're in now with AI, and it's very analogous to what when .coms and internet first became a household appliance, right? Like, what is going to happen to it? So like, we need to be bold and brave in terms of like where are we taking this industry, because the world, what it is today, is going to be very different even a year from now, right? Because look how much happened just in the last year in terms of technological development. And then I like how this person anchors everything in human experiences, because at the end of the day, human is one of my favorite words. I kind of position myself as somebody who designs and philosophizes everything around the concept of humanity,
Hmm.
because at the end, it's the people who the products are for, and it's the people who are building the products, and having that synergy between the two groups will only manifest into a better product, within the human experience.
Thank you. I This is kind of a crappy question, but bear with me. And you can choose to pass on it because it's almost like asking for a cheat sheet. But how would somebody prepare to interview with you
Mhm.
without knowing you first? And all they can do is like maybe find your website. They see it's password protected. They can like find you on LinkedIn, maybe like look through some of your messages, your comments, your posts. How should they prepare for you if you were coaching that person?
That's a great question. I'm actually a big believer in transparency, so I'm very comfortable in letting you in answering this question. As a matter of fact, I was just we're interviewing somebody. I think she's maybe even listening to this broadcast right now. And she did really well in her interviews, and she's about to go into one-on-ones. And I got on a call with her right before this to prep her on one-on-ones. And one thing that I did, I actually shared some of the feedback that was in scorecards from her presentation, and she said, "Oh my God, this is so helpful. Like we never get to have this level of transparency because for whatever reason, some companies don't want to give you feedback at all. They say it's against their policy, which I think is just atrocious and just so unfair. But I love transparency. So for me to interview with me, I think very first thing, like even if you don't get through the interview with me, it doesn't mean you are a bad person by any means, or it doesn't even mean that you're a bad designer. Like I've interviewed a lot of really great designers that just were not the right fit for the
Hmm.
role, whether it's level or specialization or just what my CEO wants at the moment. You know what I mean?
Right.
So in many ways, it could be just that. So definitely do your very best to not take these things personally in any interview. I tell this to myself every single time. Be yourself. Be confident. Don't be over or under caffeinated. All those things that I was talking about that I practice myself when I'm on the other side of the interview table. And then talk to me like we're having a dialogue. I think this is for like a one-on-one, particularly that first initial screening, right? I want to have a conversation with you, and I want to see how well you kind of hold yourself up, and how easy it is for you to just have a dialogue. Like I don't like to Q&A somebody, and I definitely have been in those interviews myself where I got grilled sometimes by a recruiter, and I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
just like prepare. And you can hear them typing when you're answering questions, and it's just like makes it extra uncomfortable. I just want to have a conversation with you. I don't even take notes. Like I really don't. I just it's in my head. I've done this so many times, and I have such a good human acumen that I can really evaluate the person, and I build a lot of relationships. It's really who I am, and I wouldn't be where I am in my life had I not invested in just really listening to a person and getting to know them in that moment. So in that interview with me, I want to get to know you, and I want to see what you're all about, and then I'll ask you some specific questions. But a lot of times they're either for me to like, are you the right fit for this particular role? Because sometimes you may not be, but I'll just keep you on my roster, and there might be another opportunity somewhere down the line with me, or maybe I can refer you somewhere else. I'm always happy to do that. But those who are mumbling, who are nervous, who are unprepared, those things usually kind of just fall apart.
Is there any way they can prepare ahead of time to interview with you?
Well, with me or with anybody else,
Yeah.
right? And that's another tip that I'll give everybody. Like before the interview, give yourself like 30 minutes of complete like silence and non being disrupted prior. Read the company, about the company in that moment. Look on LinkedIn about the person you're going to be interviewing with. Don't worry. I'm not going to stress you out in an interview. I've
Yeah.
been told before that I'm a tough interviewer. One of my very first team that I managed like bazillion years ago, one of my designers, he said, you came to, this was back when we were all in person. He said, you came to the interview in a red dress and boots. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. And I've grilled people. I think I grill design leaders, than I do ICs. But I think the more mature of a design leader I become myself, the more empathy I have for the interviewing experience. So I try not to like bust anybody's balls.
Oh, on donations, we just got $60 from Mian Lim and another donation from somebody anonymous. Please, if you're anonymous, just hit me up. Let me know you donated so I can thank you in person or privately. It just means a lot to me, and I kind of want to know who it is so I can thank you and just keep track of that, because it's just so appreciated. Thank you so much, everyone who's donating, and please hit the QR code if you haven't donated yet. We always appreciate donations. We're trying to see if we can hit $1,000 by the end of the day today. Okay, Maria, I have to ask when. Oh my God, I lost my train of thought completely. This is. Oh boy. I had it. I swear, I
It'll
had
come
it.
to you. Let's just move on, and then it will come.
Yeah. So all this throughout all this process, when people are interviewing with you and they have their portfolios done already. Oh my God, I don't have any questions right now.
Oh my God, there's no
Yeah.
way it's possible. I mean, listen, this is what I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
Just I think it's a good kind of thought to share. Everybody who is listening here, everybody I know who follows you, myself on LinkedIn, like there's been a lot of hardships and a lot of pain and a lot over the last couple of years. I've seen things from, oh, I got let go today from,
Yeah.
layoffs, and I didn't even save stuff on my portfolio, right? Make sure you save your work to your portfolio before anything happens. Save work as you do it, right? Back
Yeah.
stuff up. Somebody says something nice about the work that you've done on Slack, screenshot it. Okay. You're somewhere with your team and folks are sitting and brainstorming. Maybe it's a workshop and there's whiteboarding going on. Take a B-roll shot. All of these things will come in handy when building out your portfolio later, right? So if these kind of things have happened, right? Other things that have happened, folks just can't find a job. 6 months, 9 months. For the record, never really taken me less than 6 months to find like the really great job, even under the best conditions, even in 2020. So it's okay if it takes longer. But it's been like a year, 18 months. I see those terrible posts on LinkedIn when they're like, I'm fixing mopeds just to make money to pay my phone bill, like heartbreaking posts where like, somebody hire me. I do anything. I don't know how to fix this problem, right? But I certainly do hope that something will change. It's kind of hard to tell what the markets are going to be like, but because this stretched for like 2 years, something has to happen. I don't think we're ever going to go back to 2020, nor do I want to be honest with you. It was like an anomaly.
Yeah.
And I think it actually caused much damage during this time that actually impacted people's lives in a negative way. And frankly, so many businesses have gone through this roller coaster and now they're like, oh, what happened? We were doing so good, and well, you were a COVID infused business, and the same thing for designers. You had, when Brian was talking earlier today, he said, like the boot camp era and anybody can be a designer was like the big advertising slogan. And that's just not true. Like a lot of folks who unfortunately have become designers, and if you're listening here, like my heart just breaks for you, but some folks that's just not the right career path, and you were so like my husband, and I hope he's not listening because he doesn't like me spreading his business, but he went to culinary school. He's really good at cooking, and he went to culinary school when they were like pumping up those commercials like 10, 15, 20 years ago, whenever that was. And then they were like, yeah, you have all kinds of jobs. You'd be a chef, you're a restaurant, whoop, whoop, whoop. And then it just didn't work out that way. And he felt totally like ripped off, and it really sucks. And he worked in cooking, but then he ultimately just said, I'm done. That's not the thing for me. But the same thing happened with design and all of that. So, get good at what you do. And also, like I saw a woman post recently, she said that, I actually decided that this is not for me, and my mental health is more important, and I'd rather go to like being a freelance graphic designer. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, you'll get paid less than product designer, but at least you'll do what you love if you're able to, position yourself right. Not that graphic design is having an easier time getting a job nowadays, unfortunately.
So I totally remember my question now, and I've done way too many lives. I realize this is I've hit my limit. But Lex Roman asked a really great question I want to like tackle first, because how do you recommend people look at a job post to decide if they really are a good candidate for it? Because you got a bunch of designers that, like, I've seen a ton of designers who are just like, I see an open role, I hit apply, especially if it's easy apply, right?
Yeah.
Because you're just trying to spread out your chances, try to get to as many job interviews as you can. But it sounds like we're kind of going the opposite direction now since 2021, where we're more focused. So how do you tell if it's like, this is the right one for me?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think first you want to decide which ones are just wrong for you and not apply to those. So for me, like personally, whenever I was looking for a job, if it was like, oh, crypto, and I'm like, okay, well, this is not for me. I just don't. I actually don't have any fintech experience, and I'm gladly go into it from the human side. But like crypto, I don't know anything about crypto, or like something really heavy in B2B that like it's just not something that I do. So I wouldn't go there. I would, sometimes you can read a job description and it can be pretty specific. Like they will give you the team name and you're like, oh, I've done stuff like this, like onboarding or checkout or something. You're like, oh, well, I have experience working in a similar team, trust and safety, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's a good sign. Sometimes they're just generic, right? And by the way, I heard that you should not use Easy Apply. There's been a lot of recruiters who posted, I've seen posts who they're like, LinkedIn Easy Apply actually just like puts you through this funnel of like you're never gonna get discovered. I don't know, Hayden, you may know better than I do, but I personally usually prefer to apply from the actual website. I don't even use LinkedIn apply button. I usually go to the website, find the job description there and apply there. But be not only aligned with the job description, but with the company, right? Do you gel with what they do? Because everybody wants you to be really bought into their mission and be able to champion it, right? So like do you align? Because when you go to pitch it, you're gonna have to tell them, like you got to make them feel good about their own product, right? Company size. Is the company like some folks are just desperate and they just need like a job, and I totally get it. Listen, we got to pay the bills, like, and again, my heart just breaks for folks like that. And sometimes maybe your bar for like where you go is a little bit lower, but ultimately once you get the job, you're either going to be happy there or not, right? So kind of like imagine yourself working there. Like, is this the right kind of company for you? And again, understandable that I think it could be secondary given everything that's going on now.
So I imagine you might have certain clients who are not able to land a job easily, or even with your coaching to support them. At what point do you decide, okay, maybe I should be helping you transition out of this field entirely in a graceful way, so you're not falling on like shards of glass as you're exiting it?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I haven't done that yet. I'll be honest. I'm a child. I'm an immigrant, and I think we all have this kind of mentality that you
can't fail.
You can do anything. You can survive no matter what. I remember my dad. My dad told me when we first came to the States back in the early '90s, and I was my early teens. He said that we're in America now, and you can do anything. You can whatever you want to do, you can do it, but you're never going to win the lottery. So I've always kind of just like lived by that, and I try to coach and provide support to my clients to do the same. Honestly, I feel like it's a personal decision, and you've invested so much of your time and money in making it happen. And I do believe that you can still make it happen. You might need to just invest more and do more. And I think the problem is that some people just either don't want to or don't have the stamina to, right? Because I guarantee you, anybody who is struggling, who has just boot camp in their background, if they went on and got a degree, you probably would get a bit of an easier way forward, right? But that's going like an HCI degree, right? But that's investment, money, time, a lot, right? But you can do things to make yourself overcome some of the current obstacles you're having that are outside of just the market conditions.
How do you feel about certificates? Because that's like a common question for
Yeah,
some
they're
reason. I don't
better
know
than
why.
boot camps, but nothing beats a degree. Like HCI for Carnegie Mellon, it's going to be something that looks really good. And we know that that program outputs really strong design talent. I work with many designers and researchers who've gone through that program, and it's fantastic. I know a lot of folks who went to CCA. A lot of really great talent has come out of there. And other schools like SCAD and other schools across the country that are just putting out really good talent. Those will always be higher. And I went to art school, and I've been taught by some of the great instructors and professors. And I think in many ways, I carry a lot of them very close into my chest till this day.
You care about degrees.
I do.
Yeah.
But I
Nice.
think once in a while you can get somebody who has an outstanding portfolio and experience. But a lot of that, it just doesn't fall out of the sky. So it's like degree helps with the hustle a little bit, but you still have to, you hustle regardless. I actually know somebody who is an amazing product manager. Melissa, I don't know if you're listening on here, but she came to me for coaching, and she came because she completed design boot camp. And I looked at her portfolio. I was like, yeah, it's just not gonna happen. And she knew that she wasn't a designer. It really was not her jam. And this was like back in 2020 or something like that. And she was like, I think I want a product. Sounds great. I'm like, yeah, I think you'd be great for product. She was coming from sales. That was her background. And I told her the same speech. I'm like, you can go get a degree, you can get a certificate. Product management is going to help you, because like teaching it, learning yourself, my God, it's going to be a lot of work. But she did it. She went on and she used her sales chops, and she hustled, and she went on, and she's a successful product manager, right? I also know another designer who came to me, and she was from a boot camp. Again, this was like 2021, so different situation. And she was from a boot camp, and she had, fairly basic boot camp type of a portfolio, but her background was in social media marketing. And she went on and she hustled, and she ended up getting into product design, and she's a successful product designer now.
It's really interesting because I feel like I am now doing the opposite.
Why so?
Social media marketing.
Oh, you're so good at it.
No, this is so weird.
Just
I'm what I'm
watch
doing.
my Chang. I love all of your socials. It's it's really fun following
Thank you
you, and
so much.
all of your content is fantastic.
I wanna ask a question I totally forgot.
Okay.
So one question that almost all hiring managers ask is, "Do you have any questions for me?"
Yes.
And I've learned through the hard way that you should always have a question
Yeah.
or two, and there are different tiers of questions. So what's like a great question that you've been asked before?
Oh, what I've definitely have been asked questions that like throw me off, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. I can't really think of one off off top of my head. But I think the questions that I truly appreciate they're not just like generic. So don't have a cheat sheet for questions.
Yeah.
Like get the question. The question should come out of the dialogue that we were just having. So the insightful questions that I value are those that really kind of point to this person wanting to really understand what they're getting themselves into, and actually evaluate the opportunity if it's the right fit. It's really tough, particularly today because of the market conditions, is that when folks who just want a job, they don't care, right? Like they can tell you something, like you can ask them a question during the interview and they give you the answer that's obviously makes them unfit to the job description or to what you're looking for, and then you say something to like along the lines of like, actually we're kind of doing like this thing that you don't want to do, and then they're like, oh, but that's okay because I like this to be because of X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, oh well, now they're just trying to tell me what I want to hear. But I think even in today's markets, and because the companies are so selective, I actually appreciate when candidate is being very selective, even if it's just that's your strategy. Maybe you are just like desperate to get a job, but don't come off as desperate, and still like ask me questions to really evaluate the opportunity, and make me see that you really want to provide value, and in terms of like our time spent on this call and down the line if you are to join the team.
So my opinion is if you say something, you realize the hiring manager was looking for something entirely different, I would just double down on that.
Yeah, why not?
Well, my reasoning is that if I try to switch my position all of a sudden because I read their facial expression or their response, they won't trust me anymore afterwards. They'll just feel like I'm just
Yeah.
going to tell them what they want to hear. But if I double down, then they're like, okay, this, because you can still like change their mind on some things. Like you can say, okay, well, I don't want to do this thing that you want me to do, but I'm actually really good at this other thing that you want me to do, and maybe you'll make that exception for me. But that's just my opinion. We're a little bit over time right now. This hour like just flew right by. Thanks to you, Maria. You really carried this because
Love it.
it's like the end of the day for me, and this is like hour 4 or 5 of live streaming. So I am beat.
You beat. Yeah.
I'm beat, and you did all the heavy lifting here, so I
Well,
appreciate you. You did not make this hard on me at all, because
we have
sometimes.
one more session on Saturday, so if I didn't get to catch any of the questions from today, please join us same time, same channel, Saturday, 3
Oh,
p.m.
thank you
Pacific.
so much. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. And on a donation front, we have $75 from Corey Vickery. Thank you so much for joining
Thank
us
you,
today.
Corey, my
Yeah,
loyal follower. Love you, Corey.
yeah. Thank you so much. That takes us over 200 for this episode, and we're almost to 1,000. $900, more than $900 today. So this is awesome. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it so much. It's gonna make a big difference to Tiffany and her family, and you're all awesome. I appreciate you all so much. I know I know you got to run, Maria, and there's one more question, but I'm going to address that myself. So feel free to run off, Maria. Thank you so much for
Thank you,
taking the time today.
guys. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody. See you Saturday if you want to join again.
See you all soon. Thanks, Maria. Have a great night. Morgan, are you still in a live call? Give me a message. Just say like hi or something, or like you're still here, and we can go through your portfolio real quick. By we, I mean just me. So yeah, give me a sign of life to know that you're still here. I don't think it's a sign. I don't hear anything from you, so I'm gonna assume you're gone now. But I'm gonna give you like 2 more minutes to say if you're still here, and I'll review your portfolio with you and can like talk through some of the stuff. In the meantime, I'm gonna clock out after this, grab dinner finally, because I didn't really have lunch even, so it's kind of like lunch dinner. Just want to thank everyone so much for tuning in again. Tomorrow we have another full day or full slate of events. So let me see. Tomorrow I'm gonna share my screen. Hold on. All right, you should see it. So tomorrow we have 10 a.m. career coaching with Alison Gretz, and Alison Gretz is she's an amazing career coach for designers. I think she's a VP level at this point. So if you have any issues about like, design politics, getting hired, getting promoted, she's the person to hit up. And you should absolutely attend this free event tomorrow because she's going to be dropping just truth bombs and really helpful advice. All right, Morgan, I see you're online, so I'm going to go back to you in a second. And then at 1 p.m., we have live portfolio reviews with Miranda Slater. on YouTube. So check that out. If I don't know if they'll allow you to submit portfolios yet, but this is gonna be awesome. And then you have Hanging with Design Better co-founders Aaron Walter and Eli Woolery. So that's pretty cool because they're crap. I actually should know them a little bit better, but I've heard good things about them, and you should definitely check them out. And then AMA, Building a Career in Content Design by Yvonne Xiao. So Yvonne has a pretty big following on YouTube, and I really like her content. Like, she really underestimates herself, I think, because she's like, I'm not sure people want to hear this, but I'm like, yeah, no, she is legit. She's probably one of the best content designers I know. She works at Uber right now, and she is awesome. So definitely check that out. I will check it out if I'm able to. And then I also have a full slate of events that I have not added yet to the freaking calendar because I've been really busy and I'm lazy and slow. So tomorrow, oh crap, we have 7 events. So that's 7 hours for me, and I'm totally gonna not make it. So 10 a.m. we have a call with Jeremy Miller. 11 is gonna be Kat Small. That's gonna be so awesome because Kat Small is one of the best staff designers out there. She's worked at Etsy, Dropbox, all the coolest places, and she does like gaming design as well. And 12 p.m. I'm gonna have Jeff White. So, oh crap, you can't even see the screen because I'm not even showing you that. Amateur. Yeah, so 10 a.m., Jeremy, Kat Small, Jeff White, the author of UX Storytelling, one of my favorite courses for only $150. Worth it every single time. Hit him up. You can ask him for a discount with a coupon called Trevor Sucks. Inside joke, Trevor does not actually suck. He's donated money to this event, so I really appreciate him. And then at 2 p.m., we have Nicole Landry and Ron Golden. Nicole, if you're still here, she's in the chat. She's awesome. Both are director level designers from Dropbox and other ones from Meta and Walmart. So it's going to be really, really awesome. You're going to learn so much from design directors. And then we have 3 p.m. Debbie Levitt. She's going to be talking about transitioning outside of design for folks who realize that design field has changed too much against their favor. So it'll be really educational. I can't wait for that. Fun fact, I actually got my start. My first live stream was with Debbie Levitt. This is like 2 years ago. I was just starting to write on LinkedIn. So I owe her big time. Wouldn't be where I am today without her. And then 4 p.m. with Ryan Scott. So he's got some really amazing courses on Maven, some of the best courses on product strategy and design strategy for senior level designers. He's been in some of the biggest companies in the world, Palantir, DoorDash, Airbnb, etc. He knows his stuff. So tune into that. Ha Fan again after today. God, she is awesome. Can't wait for that. So can't wait for all this. I'm gonna go into whatchamacallit. Yeah, let's look at Morgan's portfolio. Okay, so Morgan, you're gonna have to help me here a little bit because I'm assuming you're gonna be a product or UX designer because that's kind of what Maria and I are into right now. Like I'm a UX or design recruiter, and Maria is in product design and UX design or UI design, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to be looking at your portfolio from that viewpoint. So if I see creative direction, while that could be really cool, it's kind of a tertiary thing. And it makes me feel like you're more of a creative director than a product designer. So again, like think about what kind of job you're applying for, because right now I'm like, okay, you're a creative director as opposed to product designer. And while this looks great, I don't really understand how this would apply to a product designer, UX design job that I'm recruiting for, right? So yeah, okay. Let's see. Overall, the visual design of all this stuff is really great. I notice how I'm like skimming through everything really quickly. That's just kind of my approach as a recruiter. I think most recruiters just like skim through things really quickly to make a snap decision. Because I was talking to Tom Griever last night, and he's like, yeah, he opened up a job, and they were like eight or 900 applicants within the span of a few days. So for the first pass, you're just like looking through things really quickly, getting it done in like, 10 seconds. So I'm probably going to look through this really quickly to see, okay, do you have a good eye for design? Do you have good taste? And so far I'm like, yeah, you probably got it. And this is all cool, but I'm hiring for a UX and product design role. I know there's a delay in the chat. So I'm going to ask you, like, what kind of roles are you going for? That's like the first question that I should be asking, because my feedback would be very much based on that. And if you're going for a creative director role or like graphic design role, I probably can't really help you. I don't think my opinion would be valid at that point. Great. I'm a graphic designer and creative director. Yes, not so much a product designer. Okay. Yeah. So that's going to be tough right now. So I'm going to go into product design and I'm seeing physical products. So I know there's like this terminology difference, and there are a lot of traditional product designers who are like, you young product designers who work in digital. Yeah, that is not, sorry, that is not like totally different, even though they use the same terminology. Apologies if this doesn't apply. All good. I'm a graphic designer, creative director. Yes, not much product designer. Yeah, Morgan, I'm so sorry. I wish I could help you more. I'm just not the right person. I have not recruited for creative directors or for physical product designers at all. So apologies. Yeah, well, wish I could help you there. So that's it tonight. I am super beat. I hope to see more of you folks tomorrow. And if you haven't donated yet, please scan the QR code or find the link in the comments and donate to Tiffany. We really appreciate you all. I am beat, but I'm just so happy and so inspired by everyone. And I definitely feel extremely grateful for the folks who have tuned in, engaged with all this content, and like help spread it and drive the donation. We're almost to $1,000 today again. So it's almost $2,000 in 2 days. That is awesome. Just so happy. Thank you, everyone. And please have a wonderful night. I'll see you all tomorrow.